Let's talk about something else many have written to me about. What the hell happened to the alt-right? Where did they go? Are they still around? At the start of Trump's presidency, everything was alt-right. We are the alt-right. They are the alt-right, both self-professed and discussed in media, in policy circles, etc. Rarely, if ever, do we hear about the alt-right today. So what happened to it? Did it go the way of the Tea Party, partially destroyed, partially integrated into the modern Republican Party? Has MAGA Trumpism essentially absorbed the alt-right? Well, let's talk about it. In the early 2010s, as the Tea Party had gotten their wins and then started to fade, that happened in 2010. So then you go to 2013, 2014. This new political movement emerged in the United States, which was ultimately known as the alt-right. Loosely defined group of individuals, rejected mainstream conservatism, dabbled in white nationalism, dabbled in anti-Semitism, dabbled in xenophobia, and all sorts of other far-right ideologies. And as the 2016 presidential election got going and Donald Trump ultimately won the nomination of the Republican Party and became a general election candidate and won 2015, 2016, 2017, we saw the alt-right gain significant prominence. Since then, though, the alt-right as such has significantly faded out of public eye. Why did this happen? There's a number of things that are going on, important to identify to understand the continued evolution of MAGA Trumpism. Number one, the alt-right as such started to get hit with significant backlash from media, from the left, and from mainstream conservatives as well. People like Mitt Romney, Kinzinger, etc., who distanced themselves from the movement and condemned its extremist views. They saw that under Trumpism, it was continuing to grow and that it wasn't a good thing as far as they were concerned. Secondly, many of the alt-right leaders ended up exposed. They were exposed as really just being racist, really just being anti-Semitic, really just being xenophobic. And so many of the alt-right leaders lost credibility and they lost support. And some of them ended up kind of dissolving into MAGA Trumpism. Third, we saw MAGA Trumpism accept and absorb some elements of alt-right ideology. Certainly the cultish loyalty to Donald Trump, the rejection of establishment politics, embracing populist rhetoric, which you then fill in with right-wing policy prescriptions when it comes to it. And so MAGA Trumpism, I mean, listen, I'm trying to be fair and charitable here. There are, of course, elements of anti-Semitism and white nationalism in MAGA Trumpism, without a doubt. I don't believe Trump created them, but he coalesced them and he welcomed them in. The MAGA Trumpism, I'm trying to be accurate, but also not weaken it. MAGA Trumpism was less overtly anti-Semitic and homophobic and whatever else the case may be than the alt-right, and thus has achieved some success by kind of integrating some of those alt-right elements into it. One big difference between the alt-right and MAGA Trumpism is that MAGA Trumpism has succeeded in part because they have this charismatic, to some degree, cult-like leader in Trump, whereas the alt-right never really had that leader. They had a bunch of different people who led different aspects of it, Richard Spencer, maybe Gavin McInnes, and I know I'm forgetting a bunch of others, but they didn't have Trump. And so Trump's presence was a big factor in MAGA Trumpism superseding the alt-right. So bottom line, the alt-right as such has indeed greatly faded from public view. Its views haven't gone away, and it has a legacy inside of MAGA Trumpism. The question we are now left with is, will it survive another election cycle? Or will the Boeberts and the Marjorie Taylor Greens and Trump himself suffer a 2024 defeat that could be the final nail in the coffin for this roughly decade period, is what it will be at the end of the day. 8 years, 10 years, roughly 11 years, depending on when you consider the start of alt-right. Will alt-right die as part of MAGA Trumpism in 2024? That's the question that remains to be answered, and one we're going to continue asking. We'll take a quick break. Make sure you are subscribed to the YouTube channel at youtube.com/The David Pakman Show, pushing very strongly towards 2 million subscribers. One of our sponsors is Electric E-Bikes. I've been watching e-bike reviews on YouTube for a while because I've been thinking of getting one, and I continually come across Electric as the brand to go with if your budget is between $800 and $1,300. And I have to agree from experience. I've had my electric e-bike for a little while now. I've almost ditched my car and regularly bike at this point for errands and things around my neighborhood. It's awesome cardio because I'm still pedaling. I get there faster. I can see more. I'm reducing my carbon footprint. The e-bike came to my doorstep fully assembled. It has a bright LCD screen, 7-speed gearing, 5 levels of pedal assist, a powerful battery that you can take inside to charge. It's also fully foldable. I can put it in the back of my car. Electric has models for every lifestyle, and you can finance for as little as $73 a month. Go to electricebikes.com to learn more. Explore all of the incredible e-bike models they offer. The link is down below.